multiple choice writing. So this is the English section as it's often called. And so for this, there's two question types. There are the grammar questions and there are the editing questions, as I generally call them. Grammar questions go like this. There's an underlined section of the passage. You look at the underlined section of the passage, and then the answer choices, there's only 4. No change, and then 3 variations on that underlined section. Those are the grammar questions. What you want for those is you want to pick the most correct, concise, and relevant answer. Most correct, that's pretty straightforward, means no grammar errors. Most relevant, that's also really straightforward. That means it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. It's not a big deal. Maybe 1 or 2 questions per passage really raise that issue. Concision is the secret on the writing section. They always want the shortest grammatically correct answer. If you have 2 answer choices and they are both grammatically correct and one is longer than the other one, you do not want that longer one. You want the shorter one. You pick the shorter one, you are good to go and move on. The test makers implicitly believe that good writers do not use excess words. They say what they mean to say and they move on. Wordiness is disfavored. So what does length mean? It means word count. Generally speaking, I don't encourage students to actually literally count the words in each of these answers. You just basically eyeball it, and usually that's just fine enough. But if you are trying to decide between 2 answer choices, they both look correct, one of them shorter than the other, pick the shorter one and move on. In fact, on most of the grammar questions, you can work from the shortest answer choice back to the longest answer choice, and that way the first question you see, if you're working from your shortest to longest, if it's grammatically correct, you're done and you can move right on. You might want to check them just to be sure that you're not missing something, but in theory, you work from shortest to longest, the first grammatically correct answer, that's it. So I do want to talk a little bit about the editing questions before we dive into the grammar to know, because the editing questions have different formats and they're answered in a different style. The editing questions give you a question stub. They're something along the lines of the author wants to add this information. The author wants to delete this information. The author wants to reorganize this passage. The author wants to emphasize descriptive language. Your goal is to answer that stub's goal. You don't have to worry about grammar. All the sections are grammatically correct, and you don't have to worry about wordiness unless the question stub explicitly talks about length or wordiness. What you have to focus on is which of these answer choices best does what the stub wants. Length doesn't matter, grammar doesn't matter, it's really critical reading. You're really revising to help the author achieve his or her goals. So, don't worry about grammar with those questions that have a stub. It's not an issue. It's about the editing and about the arrangement, about cause and effect, the right flow, the right transition between 2 paragraphs, not classic grammar. So with that said, let's actually take a look at the grammar you're expected to know, and that's going to be, first of all, subject-verb agreement. So this is a tricky issue that's usually fundamental. Many cases, I take that back, it's not tricky, but at the highest difficulty, it can catch even students who are quite good at grammar. And I'll give you an example of that. So in English, we have this I don't know what you call it, but at least it's how we speak, this grammar rule, that if you have a singular noun, the verb gets the S. The cat runs. Cat singular, verb runs ends in S. Now let's say you have plural nouns, the cats. Well, when you have the cats, the run does not get the S. So the cat runs, the cats run. That's a general rule in English. Most of our singular verbs end in S. Many of our plural verbs do not end in S. They lose that. So the way the test maker makes this tricky is they like to do something like this. The leader of the students sit or sits by the stage. The leader of the student sits by the stage. The leader of the students sit by the stage. I hope I got one with S and one without there. But what you're really looking here is the leader, not the students. That's the trap here, because your ear is going to hear the leader of the students. Students is going to be the last word it hears, so you're going to want the verb to match it. The leader of the students sit by the stage, because students will sit by the stage. That is wrong. That's a common trap. It's the leader that you want to look for. They're the subject of that verb, not what's coming after that prepositional phrase of the students. So that's the kind of technical grammar you're going to end up having to review if you're getting more into trying to improve your score on the writing section. After that, you have something like pronouns and prepositions. So that's the classic, John and I went to the store, but they gave the change to John and me. I versus me rule. A lot of students have heard, oh, it's always I. And the answer is no, it doesn't matter. If it's John and I, it's not going to be, they gave the change to John and I. That's incorrect. What it really is, it's the same thing it would normally be if you didn't have a compound object there. If you just had, they gave the change to me, then it's going to be they gave the change to John and me. Those are the types of pronoun issues that you're tested on here. Prepositions, those are things like for, by, between, of, and the big issue there is that when you mix these together, you have the question who and whom, for example. Who, it comes before the preposition. Whom comes after. For whom the bell tolls. For is a preposition. Whom is being used in this case as the object of that preposition, for whom the bell tolls. Punctuation is a big issue. Commas, hyphens, colons, semicolons, and apostrophes. Those are the big 5 punctuation marks that they test here. Let me see if I can get these in the same order. So you have commas, hyphens, colons, semicolons, apostrophes. Those are the big 5. Make sure you review the rules for those other 4. They're pretty simple. The hyphen, colon, semicolon, apostrophe. Only 1 or 2 rules for each of those punctuation. And then commas. Commas are the big ones you want to make sure you review. Maybe you want to pick up one of those books or get it from the library. Some of the more simple grammar guides like Eats, Shoots, and Leaves is one that's been out for quite a while. Maybe your parents even picked it up. That's the sort of thing you probably want to review for commas. After that, we have diction and usage, further or farther. Further is used for metaphorical distance. Farther is used for literal distance. So Washington, D.C. is farther from us than New York City here in Vermont. Why? Or how can you remember that? Well, remember, you can always walk far. You can't walk fur. So that's how you remember that far or farther is used for actual distances. Further is used for metaphorical distance. We are further along in our studies of the SAT than we were when we started.